Hello and welcome to another episode of Love Aptitude Tests. If this is your first time joining my channel, watching this series, make sure to like, share, subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate it. I'm gonna get to it. Christianity, one of the world's most practiced religions, has been a profound source of spiritual solace, moral guidance, and communal strength. Yet its teachings have also been weaponized within systems of oppression, particularly in the construction and maintenance of white supremacy. This tension between a liberating faith and its colonial distortions sits at the heart of understanding the role of Christianity in racial injustice. Like many institutions and belief systems, has been used historically in various ways, including as a tool within systems of oppression, such as white supremacy. This isn't a critique of the faith itself, but rather of how it has been manipulated by those in power. Here's a breakdown of how Christianity has been entangled with white supremacy, both historically and in modern times. Let's go deeper. Colonial Christianity, the conquest of souls and land. When European powers set out to explore and dominate the world, Christianity traveled with them. Catholic and Protestant empires alike rationalized conquest through religious narratives, asserting a divine mandate to civilize non-Christian people. The doctrine of discovery, which is a series of the 15th century papal decrees, gave European monarchs religious authority to claim any land not inhabited by Christians, which was a theological foundation for genocide, displacement, and slavery. Christian missionaries often accompanied colonizers and served as cultural agents of empire. In many cases, they erased indigenous spiritualities, languages, and systems of knowledge under the banner of salvation. Missionary work was often tied to imperial goals, and indigenous cultures were suppressed in the name of saving souls. Slavery in the Americas. Christianity was used to justify the transatlantic slave trade and the institution of slavery in the U.S. Enslavers cited Bible passages to argue that slavery was divinely sanctioned, i.e., the curse of Ham narrative. Slaveholders often allowed only heavily censored versions of the Bible, cutting out themes of liberation and resistance. Christianity was instrumental in justifying slavery. Slaveholders twisted scripture to legitimize bondage, arguing that it was God's natural order for Africans to serve whites. The story of Ham, misinterpreted as a divine curse on black people, was used as a biblical rationale for slavery. Slaves were often allowed to hear only selected scriptures, excluding messages of justice, freedom, or rebellion. Bible editions like the Slave Bible were removed from the book of Exodus and other emancipatory narratives. Although enslaved Africans forged a powerful counter-theology, developing a spiritual tradition rooted in liberation, not subjugation. Songs, prayers, worship became tools of survival and defiance. The Christian God in their eyes was not the God of the oppressor, but of the enslaved, a deliverer like Moses. The white Jesus narrative. European imagery of Jesus as white reinforced racial hierarchies and the idea of divine whiteness. This whitewashing supported the belief that God and goodness were aligned with whiteness, marginalizing non-white people in religious and cultural narratives. Visual representations of Jesus as a white European have reinforced the equation of whiteness with holiness, power, and divine favor. These depictions are not biblically or historically accurate. Jesus was a Middle Eastern Jew, but their cultural impact has been profound. The white Jesus became a religious icon that subtly taught believers to associate salvation and truth with whiteness. Black and brown bodies were often depicted as sinful, dangerous, or heathen, requiring control or conversion. This visual theology contributed to the cultural logic of white supremacy, a world in which whiteness was not only dominant but divinely ordained. Segregated churches and racism in worship. Many white churches supported segregation and resisted the civil rights movement. Black Christians often had to form their own denominations and worship spaces due to exclusion or discrimination. The black church became a place of resistance, but white Christian institutions were often complicit in systemic racism. Throughout American history, white churches have frequently upheld segregation and resisted racial equality. From the colonial period to the Jim Crow era and beyond, many denominations preached that slavery and later segregation were consistent with Christian teachings, excluded black people from full membership or forced them to worship separately, and opposed the civil rights movement or remained silent while violence raged around black people. Even today, American Christianity is starkly segregated. According to studies, Sunday morning remains the most segregated hour in America. While some churches have taken steps towards racial reconciliation, many others still ignore or resist conversations about white supremacy. Christian nationalism, the modern face of religious white supremacy. In the U.S., Christian nationalism often aligns with white supremacist ideologies, advocating for a version of America rooted in white Christian dominance. This is evident in political rhetoric, opposition to immigration, and efforts to roll back civil rights under the guise of religious freedom. In recent years, a dangerous fusion of Christianity and white nationalism has reemerged, particularly in the U.S. Christian nationalism promotes the idea that America was founded as a white Christian nation and shall remain that way. It often weaponizes religious rhetoric to oppose immigration, LGBTQ+ rights, multicultural education, and racial justice movements like Black Lives Matter. January 6, 2021 offered a stark illustration. Rioters carried crosses, Jesus saved signs, and Christian flags while storming the Capitol, showing how Christian symbols can be co-opted into extremist ideologies. This movement distorts Christianity into a tool for political dominance, deeply aligned with whiteness and so-called patriarchy. The European Christian identity. As European nations emerged from the Middle Ages, Christian identity was central to defining who belonged and who didn't. During the Reconquista in Spain, Christianity was tied to ethnic purity. Jews and Muslims were forced to convert or be expelled. Those who converted were often still viewed with suspicion, leading to racialized understandings of religion. In this way, Christian began to signify not just a religion, but a racialized cultural identity rooted in European lineage. Papal decrees such as the Doctrine of Discovery of 1452 to 1493 gave Christian explorers the right to conquer and claim lands inhabited by non-Christians. This authorized European powers to seize indigenous lands across the Americas, Africa, and Asia, and served as a theological justification for genocide, enslavement, and cultural erasure. Christianity, under this logic, became a divine passport for white supremacy. Slavery and the birth of American whiteness. In the colonies, laws were passed to distinguish between white Christians and enslaved Africans or native people, regardless of faith. Even when Africans converted to Christianity, they were still seen as subhuman. This contradicted Christian teaching, but was rationalized to preserve white colonial power. Over time, whiteness became associated with freedom, property, and divine favor, while blackness and indigenous people became synonymous with heathenism or inferiority. Today, white nationalists often deploy Christian imagery, language, and narratives, but in a way that distorts core Christian values. This modern fusion is less about theology and more about ethno-cultural dominance, disguised as religious tradition. Christian nationalism is the belief that the U.S. was founded as a Christian nation and should remain one, usually defined in white Protestant terms. It promotes the idea that Christianity should have special legal status and that non-Christian or non-white influences are threats to the national identity. It often is expressed through calls for mandatory Christian prayer in schools, rewriting history to claim America was founded solely on biblical principles, and opposing immigration, multiculturalism, and civil rights. White nationalists often emphasize a racialized version of Christianity, sometimes outright rejecting Jesus as a Jew or aligning him with Aryan traits. Some groups adopt Christian identity theology, which falsely claims white Europeans are true descendants of ancient Israel, and that non-white people are inferior or even soulless. Others embrace soft white supremacy, promoting Western civilization as a Christian achievement under threat from Muslims, immigrants, or others. The January 6th riot insurrection exposed this fusion clearly. Rioters carried crosses. For many, this wasn't just political rebellion. It was a religious war for the soul of white Christian America. Many modern policies tied to white Christian nationalism come cloaked in the language of religious liberty. These policies invoke God while serving the interests of white patriarchal control. The risk of Christianity and white nationalism. White nationalism with a Christian face gains legitimacy among mainstream believers who don't recognize how their faith has been co-opted. It fosters a form of cultural authoritarianism that demonizes diversity as godliness. It undermines true Christianity, which centers love, humility, justice, and liberation. In conclusion, white nationalism's use of Christianity reflects a broader struggle over the soul of the faith itself. Will it remain a tool of racial exclusion and political dominance, or can it be reclaimed as a faith of justice, inclusion, and radical love? Christianity's story is not just about what people believe in. It's about who has the power to define the divine and what the power is used to justify. If you like this video, make sure to like, share, subscribe to the channel. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Check out the other videos in this series, Love Aptitude Tests.